All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a rainy San Diego. And today I'm
Mhm.
delighted to be joined by Dan Balcauski, who is in Austin, Texas. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. Good to meet you, John. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me on.
And Dan is the founder and chief pricing officer at Product Tranquility based in Austin, Texas, who focuses on helping high volume B2B SaaS CEOs define pricing and packages for new products. And you've worked in B2C, B2B companies ranging from startups to publicly traded companies. And we're going to talk about B2B SaaS pricing. And I love this. I love this topic, Dan. And the reason why I love this topic is mostly the pricing strategies for a lot, not most, okay, for a lot of SaaS companies, especially when they start up or whatever, is what is number one, what are my competitors charging? My nearest competitors, what are they charging? Do I want to charge the same as them, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, then stick my finger in the wind and go, yeah, that sounds about right. Why don't we just be a little bit less than our competitors? And that sounds like a great pricing strategy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's definitely different reasons to approach pricing differently when you're very early stage versus more growth stage versus mature. And so, if you're super early stage, my general experience has shown it's not going to be pricing and packaging that probably is going to be the killer in the way of your success. It's probably
Mhm.
going to be, do you actually provide value? Do people care about that value? You need to be able to charge something, because I
Yeah.
think just, hey, we're going to go out early and get a bunch of free users doesn't actually give you validated market feedback if the value is the pleasure or the price is the pain. And so
Mhm.
you want to inflict at least a little bit of that
Yeah,
pain
yeah.
and make sure it's a considered decision on your prospect's part, and they're not just saying, "Oh yeah, I'll give you my email address for a free account or whatever." That doesn't really tell you a whole lot. But I've often found that early stage, it's really determining if you solve that problem and really to provide value, but then also, do you have a repeatable way to go find other customers, other prospects in the market with that problem? And those tend to be, especially your earliest stages of your company, your two biggest issues. I mean, you got to keep the lights running, right? You don't want to
Mhm.
be selling $20
Sure.
bills for $10, right? That's, you're going to be upside down very quickly. So you want to at least be able to recover costs, but then that switches as you get into more of a growth stage, where your product gets a little bit more mature. You have a little bit more capabilities to provide differentiation between different offers. To say, if you have a good, better, best, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see really early stage companies say we need to have three tiers because everyone has three tiers.
Right.
And you're like, well, you don't really have, like, you've made three tiers, but your levels of differentiation between them are, you need a microscope to be able to tell that. So,
Yeah.
but once you get to a growth stage, you've got enough maturity in the product to be able to make that clear and differentiated. And then also you can get much more robust about, like, okay, what are the different patterns of usage and the way different customers get value of our products, so you can begin to get more mature in your process around that as well.
So when companies kind of get to a growth stage and so they've got customers, they've got some sort of foot in the market, they're kind of established, they're moving on. How should they make those decisions? Because again, I mean, I think as you said, it's like, well, we have three tiers because everybody in this industry has three tiers. But do why does everybody have three tiers? Does it make sense for everybody to have three tiers? Do I need three tiers? Do I need two tiers? Do I need whatever? And then like I said, then it's the pricing. Where do I want to come in? And that. So what is a sensible way of approaching this issue? Because I feel like it's often done very reactively and it's just done on let's copy everybody else and tweak around on the margins.
Well, I'll give you some very kind of tactical answers to some. This a pretty broad ranging
Yeah.
question you asked. So the first thing you said, like, hey, everyone has three tiers. Do we need three tiers? Good, better, best. I would say, from what I've seen, about 70% of SaaS B2B SaaS companies have a good, better, best pricing
Mhm.
architecture. It's the majority. architecture for a reason, because it works really well. It has a lot of ingrained behavioral economics principles sort of baked into it. And so, it's one of these things where, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
However, there are others, right? And I'm sure listeners, for example, probably, if they're not paying customers of LinkedIn, at least have a LinkedIn account. And if you've ever looked at LinkedIn's paid offerings, they don't have straight good, better, best. They have LinkedIn Sales Navigator,
Yeah.
LinkedIn Business Premium, LinkedIn Job Seeker, LinkedIn Recruiter. And that's a persona based architecture. And it's not that Sales Navigator is better than Recruiter. It's different. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you are this type of persona. You need these set of capabilities. And there are others as well. And so, again, that's probably the thing that could be delayed a little bit till you're in the growth stage. You don't need to, finalize that, earliest on. But there's others like Core and More, and there's different a la carte options as well as others. But and then why generally do we see between 2 and 5 of those offers? What we're looking there is, folks, generally we want to create one of each of those offers that represent a particular customer segment that's in
Yeah.
our market. And so, your intro package is for a particular segment, and then you probably have an enterprise call us package, and you probably have 1 to 3 options in the middle for other different segments. And then you want to determine what those use cases are for each of the segments really value and care about, and put them in the proper tier. Also, I mentioned before, it has some nice behavioral economics principles implied, where there's this thing in behavioral economics called the magic of the middle. Oftentimes, if you get handed a wine list at dinner, you're very unlikely to buy either the most expensive option or the least expensive option. And I don't know about you, I don't know much about wine, but also I follow that rule. You
Right.
buy the cheapest one, your date's going to give you a side eye, be like, oh, is this person
Yeah.
how they going to buy the cheapest of everything for the rest of our relationship? And also, maybe you don't need the $1,000 bottle of wine, but it's there. It also has an anchoring effect, right? It's like, oh, well, the $200 bottle of wine looks reasonable compared to the $1,000 bottle of wine. So good, better, best has that nice advantage as well. But so that's kind of some of the tactical approaches. My overall model that I help work with companies a lot on this problem, and I start from a very high level strategic view, which is I use this model called the services model of SaaS pricing. What I found was, when companies try to set prices for their software, they often face 4 big problems. They don't know who their customers are. They don't understand how their product helps customers. They can't explain why their product is special. And then they forget about pricing is more than just picking a number. And so I created this model called the services model, is acronym. All good marketers need an acronym of some sort, like the 4 Ps and the 5 Cs. And
we need more acronyms in
we
the
need
world.
more. So SVCS stands for segments, value, competition, strategy. So let's break it down quickly. So S is for segments. So who are your customers? How are they different from each other? What do they need? V is value. How does your product help those customers? Why is that important to them? C is competition. What other choices or competitive alternatives do they have available to them? So these first three elements considered inputs to the overall pricing process, because ultimately your pricing power comes from the differentiated value that you create for a particular segment beyond the competitive alternatives that are available. And then those 3 elements filter down into the final piece, which is strategy, which is how will you sell your product to the right customers. And strategy I use in the Michael Porter sets the word. So strategy is about making trade-offs. So you can't make everyone happy. So we need to choose which customers will we focus on. How will you show them that your product is the best choice, and then how will you package and price your product to make it easy for them to buy. So that's kind of the overall approach. And you can see kind of from the tactical part to the framework, we need to think of those segments early. And because that allows us to understand how we're going to create our things like our offer configuration, and then so on.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the issue, Dan, is I think is even in growth, or sometimes even in mature companies, the lack of real definition of who the ideal customer is. And it would amaze you how often that still is an issue, inside of companies. So therefore, if you have it vague, too broad, not well defined enough, I mean, you can end up with a lovely tiered structure, but you're appealing to different personas, but too different, too wide, too broad, or whatever. Instead of then narrowing things down is always your friend, because otherwise you end up, as you said earlier, with lack of differentiation between tiers and between and like I said, not having a well-defined customer profile for each tier.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me if I didn't run into it all the time myself.
Right.
And yes, it doesn't matter at scale. I think I 100% agree with you on that point. Where I've seen $10 billion public market cap companies not have a defined customer segmentation, as well as the 5 million ARR
Mhm.
startup
Right.
be in the same situation. So it's not necessarily that you get any better going that direction. And also, I think a more nuanced mistake is, oftentimes the go-to-market organizations, particularly sales, will have some sort of segmentation because they have to divide up sales
Yep.
territories. So they'll have like, well, we have
Mhm.
the commercial and the enterprise team. And so then the rest of the organization is supposed to somehow adopt that for decision making. But if you've ever been in a product design or engineering role, you know that, oh, this is product is for the commercial segment versus the enterprise segment. You know that doesn't affect any design decisions about the features you're going to build, or like
Yeah.
why they matter in one situation or the others. I mean, there's the generic cliches of like, well, the enterprise needs SOC 2 compliance, or
Yeah. Yeah.
some more two-factor authentication or some other security
Yeah. Yeah.
measure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you find actually that those sort of blend into mid-market and SMB as well. So that doesn't even necessarily hold water. But yeah, oftentimes a lot of these conversations aren't necessarily about the either the feature of the pricing
Mhm.
itself, or a feature. I spend a lot of my time on the product management side.
Yeah.
People are arguing about feature A versus feature B, which should we build, what should be on the roadmap, which
Mhm.
shouldn't. And actually, it's the wrong level of conversation, because nobody's actually defined who is the customer we're going after.
Mhm.
Because this is one of the first things, kind of a core principle of my pricing philosophy is, most people start by trying to price your product. That's absolutely the wrong approach. You
Right.
need to price the customer. Why? Because price is intrinsically linked to value, and value exists in the eyes of the customer. It doesn't exist in the bits that you're selling them. And so, if we have trying to have a conversation around pricing without the customer as the customer we're talking about as the focus, we don't have a foundation in which to have any sort of meaningful discussion about it.
Yeah. Can I just underline that, Dan? Because I just think if people take one thing away from this podcast, I think that's gold in itself. And that is, the customer at the end of the day, the profile of your customer dictates your pricing. But I'll be honest, Dan, I have rarely seen that come up in a discussion when I'm around pricing in any organizations or even ones I've consulted with. It always starts with the price and the tier and the stuff, and it's never about what is this customer willing to pay, and what do they see value in paying for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if we'll go into this at all, but just because of time. But one of the sort of tactile aspects of pricing, is like the price point. And so, one of the types of questions that you can ask in that is, there's a bunch of different methods of how to ask pricing questions, but
Mhm.
a common way to be is like, at what price point would you consider this product to be a bargain, and you consider purchasing it?
Yeah.
If I ask that same question to 100 different people, I'm going to get a wide range of answers.
Hmm.
And so the the pr- so then what do you do with that? Well, the most important part of that question is not the question I asked before, but the follow-up, which is why.
Right.
Because that why, they're going to reveal, oh, because I paid Johnny the intern to do that today, and we pay him $10 an hour. I figure, this would save me paying him, whatever, 5 hours a week.
Mhm.
And that's how I got to the price I gave you. I took some off the top because maybe I still have to have Johnny sort of review or work
Right.
the product. So it would be like, I would get the full savings I told you from his time, but we get some of it. And also, you'd get information about their context. Maybe they're comparing you to different competitive alternatives. Maybe, one of those customers is having Johnny the interns do it. The other one's like, oh, well, we have, big tech company A doing that job today, and this is what we pay them.
Mhm.
And I imagine we would, they're the market leader in the space, and you're not the market leader. So I think we'd probably pay you a haircut of what we pay them. And
Yeah.
so, and so you're going to get that really valuable information about why those different customers value your product differently. And that's where then that strategy piece comes in, which is like, okay, great. we have to, at the end of the day, we set one price. I mean, obviously you have your tiers and those could be different prices, right? So make a simplifying assumption
Mhm.
here, but which are the ones that we actually care about, right? Because, like, then we can set up all of our messaging, our marketing to be targeted. And this is really what strategy is
Yeah.
about. It's about being focused. Because if we just ask those 100 people and we get a bunch of numbers, the worst thing you could do there is just, well, let's just take the average, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because that's not, there is no average customer, and those customers gave you different numbers because they were, obviously there's going to be some stochastic noise in there as
Mhm.
well, but that is really where you're trying to lead that conversation.
Yeah, no, it's so fascinating because there's so many elements to this, and obviously, like getting it right can be an amazing for the company. But it seems to me, as I said, like these exercises don't seem to be done very often, and they don't seem to be done with the rigor necessary. And and the thing is, a lot, as you said, I mean, a lot of the changes that we see often are driven by the customer, aren't they? I mean, even by, customers adopting like B2C consumer behavior, wanting frictionless, experiences when they engage. All of that kind of puts its own pressure on you, that because you need to be constantly kind of observing customer behavior, buyer behavior.
I mean, you would hope. I mean, there's been a bunch of work, by many companies trying to help us all be more customer aware.
Mhm.
But yeah, at the end of the day, I think the this source of data is best found from talking to your customers. As
Mhm.
much as folks would love to just rely on their either product analytics suite or their transactional data, at the end of the day, I think you do have to absolutely talk to your customers and figure out what is working, what is not working for them. And if you do it right, you can enable those things like a self-service motion,
Mhm.
right? If we are able to have these conversations with customers, we understand their mental models, we understand the problems that they're trying to solve, we can create offers that match to their what they need. So just put it in simple terms. We were talking before about sort of this good, better, best offer
Yeah.
configuration. I think one good exercise, if there are folks who are listening who have a good, better, best exercise or pricing page today, do you have a tagline on each of those offers saying who it's for? And if you don't, can you? I think that's a really
Mhm.
good exercise for internal teams to do before they launch pricing and packaging. Like, this is for teams who X, this is for people who Y, because that then will allow your customers to be like, oh, I'm that person. That must be the thing for me. And even if you have a sales assisted motion on top of a self-serve motion, that can allow your sales team within a couple of qualifying questions to be like, oh, well, here you go. This is I'm going to run you through this demo that demonstrates the features. And then here's the offer at the end of that we've seen, to that effect. So it could really increase the sales motion and the velocity of your whole sales motion. If you do that well, it's way too easy. Often, if you don't do that, that it just turns into friction. In
Yeah.
software, in product, in physical product world, you could very easily know if you've created a 3-arm sweater or a 5-wheeled car, depending on if you're an auto person. It's like, but in software, it's just so easy to add more features, more
It is.
capabilities to something, and then be like, you see this long list of capabilities, be like, I don't know, is this for me? You just get confused, and then sales cycles take longer. People just opt out because the process is too confusing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I just want to underline that again because I think that's a brilliant and simple and highly effective thing to do, is actually give a persona to each of your pricing tiers, so it's easy, so I can see myself when I
Mhm.
go there. I don't have to, as I said, I don't have to, you were just mentioning, I don't have to look at these lists and try to figure out where do I fit here. And the other thing about that anyway, as you know, Dan, sometimes those comparison things is like you say, I fit here, this is perfect for me. And then you look over here and you see one thing that you would like. And then, but you're going like, but then the tiers, I've got all this other stuff I don't like and stuff. So it can, it's something that you have to be really conscious and intentional about.
Yeah, and that's, there's always going to be edge cases,
Yeah.
and I've definitely helped clients who have that situation. There's always sort of ways that you can, work around sort of exceptions. But I find the companies that have the most trouble with it is where they haven't sort of done that, base homework at yourself, right? If you're
Mhm.
seeing, 20-30% of your customers need some sort of exception because they're, you haven't placed the features correctly,
Mhm.
you probably have a problem. But it's hard to, especially if you have a volume business that you're doing hundreds
Yeah.
or thousands of transactions a month. It can be difficult to, absolutely fit everyone into every single package. But you should have at least a strong point of view on like who this is for and why the exceptions are coming up and why you're not going to address them or not. But your value is always changing, new features are always coming out.
Mhm.
The world of software is now trying to deal with, we've built this new AI functionality. Where do we place this? Is this an
Yeah.
add-on? Is this which tier does this go in? Are we
Yep.
trying, one thing we jumped over, but you're asking before, I don't want to leave out off the table, but like surprisingly, I'll get a lot of folks who come for pricing help. One of the very first questions is just like, what is the goal? What are you trying to
Mm.
achieve? Is it because, hey, our sales our sales cycle takes too long because we have to have 3 or 4 pricing conversations in the sales process because folks are so confused and they can't figure out what they need to buy? Is it
Mhm.
we're not generating enough on our net revenue retention? Are we trying to increase the adoption rate of our mid and high level tiers? We have too many people stuck in our entry level plans. Are we trying to hit some rule of 40 target? And it's funny when I ask that question because people might say like, oh, well, of course we know what we're trying to do, but then I've been on the other side of it where I'll go have those individual conversations with the C-suite executives. And everyone's like, well, of course we're trying to X. And it's like, well, that's interesting because the last person said Y, the other person said Z, the other person said A, B, right? So the team is not aligned on the goal they're trying to
Yeah.
achieve, and therefore it's difficult to even figure out sort of the strategy from there.
And sometimes it's that fear, isn't it? I mean, the fear, that whole fear of leaving money on the table, like, oh, we're too cheap, we need to go up, because I feel like we're leaving money on the table. And sometimes I think these motivations, you need to, as you said, you need to do the process properly rather than go off these kind of sometimes knee-jerk reactions. I mean, I've seen sometimes when companies have done a price increase or something, and then they don't really communicate it very well. So you're left going, well, why? And I even seen some actually have to come back and reverse their pricing. It happened recently. I can't remember the product, but they came back and reversed their pricing because of the pushback.
Well, yeah, there's endless number of different blow ups that happen. I think the most recent one, I can't remember. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get it wrong and paint the person with the wrong brush. But it was one of these AI coding assistants, and
Mhm.
they had changed their pricing. Well, this is actually an interesting topic. So they had changed their pricing, and they didn't communicate that well. And so what ended up happening was some people had like just signed up. This was all over Reddit,
Mhm.
these Reddit threads. Some people had signed up for an annual plan for their entire team of software developers, wherever they wrote them a check for like 10 grand. And then 15 days later, one developer had used the entire team's allotment for the month. And it's because they changed their pricing and they didn't communicate what they had
Right.
done really well. So then everyone got really angry. And then, especially when you irritate social developers, they tend to be very active on these social media forums. So developers, you also have to be extra careful about. So I would say in that case, it wasn't the problem that they changed it. It was a problem that they weren't clear about their communication.
Mhm.
And so I think, when people hear those sort of horror stories, I'm always trying to help clients understand, hey, it's okay. You're never going to have, no, we can do a bunch of research. We do a bunch of research to help
Right.
folks get more confidence and clarity in their plan, whether that's scenario analysis or market research, talking to customers about potential changes. Hey, what are their mental models? But you can't ever know with 100% certainty how the market will react when you put out a pricing change. What you can always improve is making sure that when something goes out, you're communicating well, and
Yeah.
the entire leadership team has your ear to the floor, listening for, did we miss anything?
Mm.
And then don't there's been a couple of companies I've seen this also remain nameless, but don't blame your customers for being too stupid to understand what you did. Apologize and say, we're going to take this back and we're going to rethink this, and we'll be back in a few weeks with a better answer. If the hordes if the hordes are at your door with the pitchforks and the torches, you don't want to tell them they're stupid and they just don't understand enough.
Yeah,
Right?
no, it's
That's
always a
not
good
a
idea. Yeah,
good
yeah. When
reaction.
there's the hordes and they're battering down the door to say, "Oh, it's all your fault. You're stupid." Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
always.
Um,
By the way, actually, Canva was one of the companies that did that, where they increased it. Like, because I've been on Canva forever, we've been on Teams. They pushed everybody, the legacy customers, all onto this new expensive tier. People revolted, they reversed it and left everybody out of loyalty on the old tiers. So they did a complete reverse. I mean, good company, I have to say, because they're very smart, they're very in tune. That was a misstep. They owned it and they moved on. Didn't make me quit the product. I was just like, yeah, good, you did the right thing. But to your point, I think when you come up with your communication strategy about, your pricing changes, yeah, everybody needs to understand it internally in the company. You probably want to test your message a little bit with some people external as well, so that because, as you said, you don't want to be scrambling with a follow-up message to explain the other message to explain that one, and then a few weeks later have to reverse everything.
Yeah. A communication plan is always important, right? If you don't have a pricing committee, you should have a pricing committee that meets regularly. You should, make sure you're enabling your reps with a clear line of feedback, whether that's a dedicated Slack channel or, whatever it works for your company, to the people who are responsible for those decisions, and making sure that they're, you have a feedback listening approach, right? And so, yeah, very rarely do customers hold a grudge when you get something wrong.
Mhm.
It's when you continue to tell the market that it's dumb and that you are better than them, that people that's when you get revolts on your hands and people leave your company.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway, not just for pricing, but it's a good takeaway in general. I have found in my life experiences that, generally speaking, when you shout at people and call them stupid, they don't tend to be very persuaded by what you've got to say.
Yeah. Well, you asked before, or you mentioned before about, this concern generally that people are leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to run over that, because I think
Mhm.
there's definitely times where companies are underpriced. Actually, in the world of software, because, until we got this wave of AI, the marginal cost to serve an additional customer has basically been infinitesimally small. And so, most products have not, needed to be very robust with pricing, traditionally, because they could get away with,
Mhm.
just effectively zero marginal cost to serve. And so, so what would be the signs that, you are leaving money on the table? If you're not getting any pushbacks from prospects on your pricing, right? They should at least,
If they're very eager to sign very quickly.
yeah, right. It's the winner's curse, right? Like, oh wait, they agreed super quickly? Did I? I could charge way more.
And they're asking me for the invoice immediately.
Exactly. Before you change your mind, can you have me sign that? Can we sign it while we're on the call today?
Uh,
If you haven't touched your pricing in years, I would say, like, if it's been at least 2 years since you've touched your pricing, it's probably time to look at it. If you are tracking things like win-loss codes, those aren't always the most, let's say, hygienic of data sources in your
Mhm.
environment, because price is usually an easy lever for the sales guy to pull if he doesn't know if he doesn't have any information. But, if you're not losing, say, at least a third of your price deals to price as the
Mhm.
reason you're losing, right? You may be leaving money on the table. And a simple price increase is generally the easiest thing to change, right? Where it gets more complicated is when you're changing things like your pricing metric, or you're
Yeah.
introducing a new product or a new tier. Those tend to be a little bit more difficult. But, if you may want to look at having, especially if you're like an enterprise type customer, you should probably have, if not automatic escalators, the right to automatically increase price by
Mhm.
some,
Yeah.
cost of living adjustment
Yeah.
per
Yeah.
year embedded in those contracts, just so you're sort of at least keeping up with the pace of inflation.
Yeah, no, I think that's another great point to take away for people. I think that's a baseline you should always have. You should have some index. You should have, where it's cost of living or whatever. Just and customers understand that and they accept that. I've never seen any real pushback on something like that. Well, listen, Dan, this has been fantastic. All of Dan's information will be below this video, and as you can tell from this interview, Dan is an absolute encyclopedia of information around pricing. So before you go, Dan, tell people a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so appreciate the conversation, John. I run a firm called Product Tranquility. We help B2B SaaS CEOs with pricing and packaging. And so we just focus on pricing and packaging all day, every day. And so if folks want to learn more about that, happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. I also run a podcast myself called SaaS Scaling Secrets, where I interview B2B SaaS CEOs about scaling their SaaS company. So that can be found wherever podcasts are available.
Fantastic. And as I said, all the information will be below the video. So thanks again, Dan. Thank you for watching and listening. And I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.